Picture this, a small town bathed in the soft glow of an October sun, the kind of place where the air smells of cider and wood smoke, where the biggest worry is whether the pumpkins will sell out before Halloween. Millbrook, Pennsylvania, was that town, a dot on the map where life moved slow and steady, where the rhythm of daily routines felt as predictable as the sunrise. On October 14th, 2023, the streets hummed with the usual chatter. Kids pedaled bikes in lazy circles, shopkeepers traded gossip over steaming coffee, and the crisp autumn breeze carried the promise of a quiet day. It was 10:17 a.m., and 29-year-old Lauren Mitchell was walking down Main Street, her red scarf catching the light like a beacon. She was a nurse, a friend, a daughter of this town, someone everyone knew or thought they did. Then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. Vanished. Not a sound, not a scream, not a single witness, just an empty stretch of pavement where she'd stood moments before. What makes this story cling to your skin isn't just that Lauren disappeared. It's how she disappeared. In broad daylight, under the watchful gaze of a town that prided itself on seeing everything, she slipped into thin air. But there's more. A single piece of evidence emerged, a shard of truth captured by a flickering CCTV camera outside Miller's Hardware. That footage, it's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, the kind of thing that turns a cozy little town into a puzzle with too many missing pieces. You see her walking, her steps casual, her scarf fluttering like she hasn't a care in the world. Then she stops. She turns. Her head snaps over her shoulder as if someone caught her eye. And just like that, the screen glitches. 3 seconds of static, 3 seconds of nothing. And when the picture returns, Lauren Mitchell is nowhere to be found. No struggle, no shadow, no clue, just a void where a woman used to be. Detectives would later call it one of the most chilling pieces of footage they'd ever seen, not because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't. The public would obsess over it, dissecting every frame, every pixel, as if the answer might be hiding in the noise. Web forums and X-posts from the time, still buzzing as late as March 2025, lit up with theories. Was it a prank? A hoax? Or something far darker? But here's the hook that pulls you in and won't let go. That glitch wasn't an accident. Someone wanted those 3 seconds erased. Someone who knew exactly how to make a woman vanish in the middle of a sunny morning. And as the hours turned to days, as Millbrook streets filled with search parties and news vans, one question hung heavy in the air. How could a town so small, so safe, so ordinary, become the stage for a mystery so sinister? Lauren Mitchell's story doesn't just start with her disappearance. It starts with that footage, a silent scream captured in black and white, a riddle that would unravel everything Millbrook thought it knew about itself. Buckle up, because what comes next is a descent into a truth more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Lauren Mitchell wasn't just another name on the missing persons report. She was the kind of person who left a mark on everyone she met. In Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a town where faces blur into familiarity, Lauren stood out, not for flash or fame, but for the quiet, steady warmth she carried with her. Born on a snowy December night in 1993, she came into the world as the only child of Tom and Ellen Mitchell, a mechanic and a schoolteacher who poured their hearts into raising her. Millbrook was her playground, her home, a place where she'd climb the oaks lining Main Street as a kid, dreaming of a life that stretched beyond the rolling hills she knew so well. Those dreams weren't loud or showy, but they were hers, and she held them close. At 16, everything changed. A car accident on Route 19 stole her parents from her. A rainy night, a slick road, a truck that didn't stop in time. Lauren was left alone, a teenager staring down a future that suddenly felt too big, too empty. But if you asked anyone who knew her, they'd tell you she didn't break. She bent, she grieved, but she didn't break. Instead, she turned that pain into something else, purpose. By 20, she was enrolled in nursing school, scraping by on scholarships and late-night diner shifts, determined to make a difference. When she graduated, Millbrook General Hospital became her second home. She worked the long shifts in the ER, the ones that leave you hollowed out, but Lauren filled them with kindness, holding a patient's hand, cracking a soft joke to ease the tension, staying late to make sure no one felt alone. Her friends called her a ray of light, and it wasn't just a figure of speech. Even on her worst days, she'd show up with a coffee for someone else, a text to check in, a smile that said she was still fighting. By 2023, at 29 years old, Lauren had carved out a life that felt steady if solitary. She lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment on Elm Street, the kind with creaky floors and a view of the woods. Her companion there was Milo, a scrappy little rescue dog she'd found abandoned on the side of the road 2 years earlier. Matted fur, one ear half torn, but eyes that trusted her instantly. They were a pair, Lauren and Milo, taking their morning walks through town, her humming softly as he trotted beside her. She wasn't one for the spotlight, but she had her people, a tight circle of friends from childhood, co-workers who'd become family, and more recently, a new spark in her life, Ryan Ellis. Ryan was a local mechanic, rough around the edges but charming in his way, and they'd been dating for a few months. To the outside world, it looked like Lauren had found her footing, a job she loved, a dog she adored, a relationship that might just grow into something more. But there was a quiet strength to Lauren, too, a fierceness that didn't shout. She'd tell you she didn't need much, just Milo, a good book, a chance to help someone. She was the heartbeat of her little world, the one who kept it all together, even when the cracks started to show. To everyone who knew her, Lauren Mitchell's life seemed steady, predictable, safe, until October 14th, 2023, when that steady life unraveled in a way no one could have seen coming. Millbrook, Pennsylvania, was the kind of town that felt like a secret tucked away in the folds of the earth. Nestled in the rolling hills of the state's northern reaches, it was a place where time seemed to slow down, where the modern world brushed up against it but never quite took hold. With a population hovering just under 5,000, it was small enough that everyone knew your name, or at least your dog's, and big enough to feel alive. The streets were lined with oaks and maples, their leaves turning crimson and gold by mid-October, painting the town in a glow that made it look like something out of a postcard. Downtown was a handful of blocks, Brew and Bean Coffee Shop on one corner, Miller's Hardware on another, a little library with a sagging roof that somehow still stood. It was the kind of place where people waved from porches, where the air carried the faint hum of tractors in the distance and the chatter of neighbors catching up over fences. Crime wasn't a word you heard much in Millbrook. The police blotter, if you could call it that, was more likely to list a missing cat or a fender bender than anything sinister. The biggest headlines came once a year when the Harvest Festival rolled around. Think hair rides, pumpkin carving contests, and a pie bake-off that got more competitive than anyone cared to admit. It was a town that prided itself on its predictability, its safety, its quiet. And on October 14th, 2023, that quiet was in full swing. The morning broke clear and crisp, the kind of autumn day where the sun feels warm, but the breeze reminds you winter's not far off. Kids were out early, pedaling bikes down sidewalks still dusted with fallen leaves. Shopkeepers propped open their doors, sweeping stoops and nodding to regulars. At Brew and Bean, the barista was steaming milk for the usual crowd, teachers grabbing lattes before school, retirees lingering over newspapers. It was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of day that slips by unnoticed. For Lauren Mitchell, it started like any other Saturday. At 8 a.m., she was up, tugging on a jacket and clipping a leash onto Milo, her scruffy little rescue dog. They took their usual loop around the block, past the old oak on Elm Street, down to the edge of the woods where Milo liked to sniff the underbrush. Neighbors saw her, waved, said their hellos. By 8:30, she was back home, pouring kibble for Milo and brewing a pot of coffee for herself. Around 9, she headed downtown, stopping at Brew and Bean for a to-go cup, black, no sugar, the way she always took it. She lingered for a minute, chatting with the barista about the weather, then pulled out her phone to text Ryan Ellis, her boyfriend. "Dinner tonight," she typed. "Your place or mine?" His reply came quick. "Yours. I'll bring the wine." It was a small thing, a thread of normalcy woven into her day. By 10 a.m., she was strolling along Main Street, her red scarf catching the breeze, her gray coat buttoned against the chill. She passed Miller's Hardware, waved at old Mr. Miller through the window, her steps light and unhurried. To anyone watching, it was a picture-perfect moment. Lauren Mitchell, a familiar figure in a familiar town, moving through a morning that felt like it could go on forever. Until in an instant, it didn't. It was 10:17 a.m. on October 14th, 2023, and Millbrook was still basking in the soft hum of a Saturday morning. Lauren Mitchell had just left Brew and Bean, her coffee cup warming her hands, her mind likely drifting to the day ahead, maybe her shift at the hospital, maybe dinner with Ryan. She was on Main Street, a stretch of pavement she'd walked 1,000 times, passing the familiar storefronts that framed her life. The CCTV camera outside Miller's Hardware caught her in its frame, one of those boxy old units mounted above the door, its lens smudged but functional. There she is, red scarf, gray coat, jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Nothing about her says hurry, nothing says fear. She's just Lauren, moving through her town like she always did. But then something shifts. Watch closely, 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 12 seconds. She slows, her steps faltering, not like she's tired, but like something's pulling her attention. She stops dead, right there on the sidewalk, her body turning slightly. Her head snaps over her shoulder, quick and sharp, as if a sound or a shadow caught her off guard. You can see it in her posture, her shoulders tense, her free hand lifts just a fraction, like she's bracing herself. She takes a single step back, hesitant, unsure. It's subtle, but it's there, a flicker of unease in a moment that should have been mundane. And then, at 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 15 seconds, it happens. The footage glitches. 3 seconds of static rip across the screen, 3 agonizing seconds where the world goes blank. The timestamp jumps, 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 15 seconds to 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 18 seconds. And when the picture snaps back, Lauren is gone. Gone. No scream echoes down the street, no footsteps pound the pavement, no one else steps into frame. The sidewalk is empty, the coffee cup she'd been holding isn't even there, just a stretch of concrete staring back at the camera, mocking its silence. 3 seconds, and Lauren Mitchell vanishes from Millbrook in broad daylight, under a sky too bright for shadows to hide in. It's the kind of disappearance that doesn't just confuse you, it chills you. Because this isn't a dark alley at midnight or a foggy backroad. This is Main Street, 10:17 a.m., with people a stone's throw away, shoppers in the hardware store, kids biking 2 blocks over, the barista at Brew and Bean wiping down tables. And yet, no one saw a thing. Within hours, the cracks in that perfect morning started to show. Lauren was due at Millbrook General Hospital for an 11 a.m. shift. Nothing big, just covering for a colleague on the weekend rotation. She was reliable, the kind of nurse who'd call if she was running 5 minutes late. But 11 o'clock came and went, and her station stayed empty. A co-worker, Jenny Hargrove, tried her phone, straight to voicemail. By 11:30, Jenny was worried enough to call around, friends, Ryan, even the landlord. No one had seen her. By noon, Jenny flagged down a patrol car on Main Street, her voice shaky as she told Officer Mark Delaney, something's wrong. Lauren doesn't just not show up. Delaney pulled the CCTV footage from Miller's by 1 p.m., and what he saw turned a missing person case into something else entirely. That 3-second glitch wasn't just a blip, it was a wall. No witnesses came forward, No cars screeched away. No one reported a struggle. Millbrook's quiet streets, the ones that had felt so safe that morning, were about to become a crime scene. Lauren Mitchell's life, steady and unassuming just hours before, had been torn apart in a heartbeat, and the town she'd called home was left grasping at a mystery that defied everything they thought they knew. The moment Lauren Mitchell vanished, Millbrook snapped awake. By 1 p.m. on October 14, 2023, the Millbrook Police Department had mobilized, a small force of 8 officers suddenly thrust into a case that felt too big for their quiet town. Chief Daniel Hargrove, a 20-year veteran who'd spent most of his career handing out speeding tickets, called in every resource he could muster. Yellow tape went up around Main Street, cordoning off the spot where Lauren had last been seen. Volunteers poured in, neighbors, co-workers, even strangers moved by the story, fanning out into the woods that hugged the town's edges, their boots crunching through leaves as they called her name. Drones buzzed above, their high-pitched whines cutting through the crisp air, scanning for anything, a scarf, a footprint, a sign she was still out there. By nightfall, Lauren's face was everywhere, plastered on telephone poles, flashing across every local news station in Pennsylvania, her warm smile now a plea for answers. But it was that CCTV footage from Miller's Hardware that gripped the investigation, and the town like a vice. Detectives hauled the tape back to the station, crowding around a flickering monitor in a room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. They played it again and again. 10 hours, 17 minutes and 12 seconds, Lauren stops. 10 hours, 17 minutes and 15 seconds, the glitch. 10 hours, 17 minutes and 18 seconds, she's gone. At first, they thought it was a malfunction, a quirk of an aging camera. But then Officer Delaney, the one who'd pulled the tape, noticed something. The glitch wasn't random static. It had a pattern, a deliberate pulse, like someone had jammed the signal. He called in a tech specialist from Harrisburg, a wiry guy named Paul Kessler who'd worked cybercrimes. Kessler confirmed it within hours. This isn't a glitch. It's interference. Someone wanted those 3 seconds blacked out. That revelation hit like a thunderclap. Lauren hadn't just disappeared. She'd been taken, and whoever did it knew exactly how to cover their tracks. The public caught wind fast. By October 15th, Lauren's story had spilled beyond Millbrook, igniting a firestorm online. Web searches for Millbrook disappearance CCTV spiked, and X lit up with theories. Posts still searchable as of March 2025, when I last checked. One user, at @PA_truthseeker, tweeted, "That glitch isn't random. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Check the signal logs." Another, at Millbrook Local, posted, "Lived here 30 years. Never seen anything like this. Something's off." The footage leaked online by the 16th, a grainy clip shared thousands of times, dissected frame by armchair detectives and true crime buffs. Some called it a hoax, others a government cover-up, but most agreed on one thing. Those 3 seconds held the key, and they weren't letting it go. Suspicion didn't take long to find a target. Ryan Ellis, Lauren's boyfriend of 4 months, was the first name on everyone's lips. He was 32, a mechanic with a garage on the edge of town, grease-stained hands, a quick grin, the kind of guy who'd fix your car and throw in a free oil change if he liked you. His alibi seemed solid at first. He told police he'd been at work all morning, elbow deep in a transmission job. But when detectives pressed his co-workers, the story unraveled. Jake Pearson, a lanky apprentice at the garage, hesitated before admitting. Ryan stepped out around 9:30. Said he had an errand. Was gone maybe an hour. An hour that overlapped perfectly with Lauren's disappearance. Ryan's truck, a beat-up gray Ford, wasn't at the shop when Jake checked at 10 a.m. Suddenly, that charming grin didn't look so innocent. Then came the bombshell. A second camera, mounted outside the post office half a block away, caught something the first missed. At 10:14 a.m., 3 minutes before Lauren vanished, A figure in a hooded jacket slipped into frame. The image was blurry, the angle poor, but it was enough. Male, medium build, moving with purpose toward the alley behind Miller's. Detectives froze the still, staring at that hooded silhouette, their guts telling them this was no coincidence. Ryan swore it wasn't him. "I don't even own a hoodie like that," he said, his voice tight, but his ex-posts from weeks prior told a different story. On September 28th, he'd written, "Some people don't know when to let go." On October 3rd, "Trust is a funny thing." Cryptic, sure, but to investigators, they read like breadcrumbs leading straight to Lauren. The investigation dug deeper, and what they found turned suspicion into dread. Jenny Hargrove, Lauren's co-worker who'd first raised the alarm, came forward with a memory that made her voice tremble. "About a week ago," she told police, "Lauren said she felt watched. We were at Brew and Bean, just catching up, and she kept looking out the window. Said she'd seen the same truck parked near her place 3 nights in a row, a gray one like Ryan's. I told her to tell someone, but she brushed it off, said she didn't want to overreact." That detail landed like a punch. Detectives pulled Ryan's phone records, found calls to Lauren's number at odd hours. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., she'd never answered. They searched her apartment, found Milo pacing anxiously, his water bowl dry, and a single window cracked open in the back. No forced entry, but the lock was loose, like someone had tested it before. By late October, Millbrook was a town on edge. The search stretched into weeks, volunteers dwindling as hope faded, but the police pressed on. Ryan was brought in for questioning, twice, his denials growing thinner each time. The hooded figure, the glitch, Lauren's unease. It was all piling up, a tower of clues leaning hard toward one man. The quiet streets that had buzzed with normalcy on October 14th were now a stage for whispers and fear. Every shadow a suspect, every unanswered question a wound. Lauren Mitchell was still out there, or she wasn't, and Millbrook was starting to realize the truth might be uglier than they'd ever imagined. 6 weeks had passed since Lauren Mitchell vanished from Main Street, and Millbrook was starting to feel the weight of a mystery with no end. By late November 2023, the search had slowed, volunteers had dwindled, the drones were grounded, and the police were chasing shadows. The CCTV footage, that haunting 3-second glitch, had been watched 1,000 times, analyzed by experts, debated online, but it still held its secrets tight. The case was cold, or close to it, and the town was bracing for the worst. But sometimes breakthroughs come from the places you least expect. On November 28th, a 17-year-old kid named Ethan Carter, a tech-savvy high schooler with a knack for coding, changed everything. Ethan had been following the case on X, where the footage had been circulating like wildfire. Curious, he'd downloaded the raw file from a public database the police had released to crowdsource help. Ethan wasn't a detective, just a kid with a laptop and too much time on his hands. Using open-source software, stuff you can find free online, he dug into the glitch, frame by painstaking frame. What he found sent a jolt through the investigation, a single recoverable image, buried in the static that the police had missed. It was grainy, flickering, but undeniable. At 10 hours, 17 minutes, and 16 seconds, right in the heart of those 3 lost seconds, Lauren Mitchell appeared mid-motion, her body angled toward a gray van parked in the alley behind Miller's Hardware. The hooded figure from the second camera was there, one arm locked around her waist, the other pulling her backward. Her red scarf was slipping from her neck, caught mid-fall, her coffee cup already gone. Her face, blurry but hers, was twisted in shock, maybe fear, as the van's side door gaped open like a waiting maw. Ethan froze, hands shaking, then uploaded the frame to X with a simple caption. "This is her. This is it." Within hours, it hit the police tip line. Detectives pounced. That partial plate, PA7KX-, was a lifeline. They ran it through the DMV database, cross-referencing every gray van in a 50-mile radius. One match stood out. A 2012 Ford Econoline registered to a storage unit in Easton, 20 miles east of Millbrook. The renter? Ryan Ellis. The same Ryan Ellis who'd claimed he was at his garage all morning, who'd dodged questions about his truck, whose ex-posts hinted at a man unraveling. On December 1st, 2023, Chief Hargrove signed the warrant himself, and a SWAT team rolled out before dawn. The storage facility was a squat, gray building off a lonely highway, its rows of rusted doors hiding who knows what. Unit 17 was Ryan's, padlocked, unassuming, until they cut it open. What they found inside turned stomachs and broke hearts. Lauren's red scarf lay crumpled near the door, its edges frayed, stained with dirt and something darker. A tarp in the back held traces of blood, later matched to Lauren's type, AB negative, rare enough to narrow the odds. Then, in a hidden compartment beneath a workbench, they uncovered the worst of it, a stack of Polaroids, at least a dozen, each one time-stamped after October 14th. Lauren was in every frame, tied up, her wrists bound with duct tape, her eyes wide with terror. The backgrounds were stark, industrial, maybe the storage unit itself, captured in the cold flash of an instant camera. One photo showed her slumped, unconscious, a bruise blooming on her cheek. The dates ran through late October, proof she'd been alive for weeks after she vanished, proof that her nightmare didn't end on Main Street. Ryan was arrested that night. Pulled from his apartment at 9 p.m., he didn't fight, just stared at the floor as they cuffed him, his jaw tight, his alibi in tatters. "I didn't do anything," he muttered, but the evidence screamed otherwise. The van, the scarf, the blood, the photos, it was a noose tightening around him, and Millbrook held its breath as the truth started to unravel. Detectives worked through the night, piecing it together. The jammer he'd used to glitch the CCTV, bought online with a credit card he thought was untraceable. The storage unit leased under a fake name that tied back to his garage's address. The hooded jacket, found balled up in his truck, fibers matching the alley's dirt. It wasn't just a crime. It was a plan, meticulous and chilling, and Lauren had been at its center. The town didn't sleep that night. Word spread fast. Neighbors gathered outside the station, some praying, some crying, all waiting for the next blow. The vigil started small, a few candles on Main Street, but by midnight it swelled. Hundreds of flickering lights, Lauren's hospital ID photo propped against a tree, Milo's leash draped beside it. 6 weeks of searching, of hoping, had led to this. A breakthrough that answered one question, but raised a dozen more. Where was she now? Was she still alive when those last photos were taken? And why Lauren? Why here? Why him? The stakes had never been higher, and as December 1st bled into the 2nd, Millbrook stood on the edge of a truth that would either heal them or break them for good. December 1st, 2023, had cracked the case wide open, but it wasn't until February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day of all days, that Millbrook got its first taste of closure. Ryan Ellis stood in a Northampton County courtroom, a far cry from the charming mechanic who'd once waved to neighbors on Main Street. The evidence from the storage unit, the scarf, the blood, those gut-wrenching Polaroids, had left him cornered, his denials crumbling under the weight of what police had found. That morning, in a plea deal to avoid a trial that would have dragged Lauren's memory through the mud, he confessed. His voice was flat, almost mechanical, as he laid it out for the judge, the prosecutors, and a packed gallery of townsfolk who'd come to hear the truth straight from his mouth. He'd been stalking Lauren for weeks, he said, ever since late September, when she'd sat him down at her apartment and told him it was over. She'd been gentle about it, he admitted, saying she needed space, that things weren't working. But Ryan couldn't let go. That rejection festered, twisting into an obsession he fed with late-night drives past her place, calls she stopped answering, notes he never sent. By October, it wasn't enough to watch her. He wanted to own her. He'd planned it meticulously. A cheap signal jammer from some sketchy online forum, tested in his garage until he knew it'd black out the CCTV for just long enough. On October 14th, he'd called her from a burner phone, mimicking a neighbor's voice, claiming Milo had been hit by a car and was bleeding in the alley behind Miller's. Lauren didn't hesitate. She ran to save her dog, straight into the trap he'd set. In broad daylight, with the town buzzing around them, he grabbed her, dragged her into that gray van while the jammer did its work. She fought, he said, harder than he'd expected, clawing at his face, kicking until he slammed her head against the door to stop her. The Polaroids told the rest. He'd kept her alive for weeks, hidden in that storage unit, bound and gagged, a prisoner in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Why? I didn't want her to leave me, he told the court, as if that explained it. But sometime in early November, he'd killed her, strangled her, he confessed, when she wouldn't stop screaming. On November 8th, under a cold moon, he'd driven 20 miles east to a stretch of woods off Route 33, dug a shallow grave, and left her there, hands still bound with the same duct tape from the photos. The confession broke Millbrook, but it also gave them a map. On February 15th, guided by Ryan's directions, police found her, a team of officers and a cadaver dog combing the woods until they hit that patch of disturbed soil. Lauren's body was there, wrapped in a tarp, her red scarf still knotted around her neck like a cruel echo of that October morning. The autopsy confirmed it. Strangulation, days or weeks after her abduction, her wrists raw from fighting the tape. Ryan was sentenced that same day, life without parole, no chance of appeal. The judge's voice was steel as he read the verdict. You took a light from this world, and you'll pay for it in darkness. The gavel fell, and Ryan was gone, led away as the courtroom sat in stunned silence. But for Millbrook, justice didn't heal the wound. It just stopped the bleeding. The scars ran deep, etched into a town that had lost its innocence in those 3 seconds of static. Main Street felt different now, quieter, heavier, the kind of place where people locked their doors at night and eyed strangers a little longer. Vigils sprang up almost nightly in the weeks that followed. Hundreds of candles lining the sidewalk outside Miller's Hardware, Lauren's hospital ID photo at the center, surrounded by notes and teddy bears. Her friends, led by Jenny Hargrove, channeled their grief into action. By March 2024, they'd launched Lauren's Watch, a safety campaign pushing for more cameras, better lighting, a community alert system, anything to make sure no one else slipped through the cracks. Milo, Lauren's scruffy little dog, became a symbol too. Jenny took him in, and photos of him at the vigils, curled up beside her, wearing a red bandana, spread online, a bittersweet reminder of the woman who'd saved him first. The news cycle moved on, but Millbrook didn't. Ryan's confession answered the how and the where, but the why lingered like a ghost. Why Lauren? Why their town? Why a man they'd trusted could hide something so dark? As winter thawed into spring, the streets stayed quiet, the woods stayed searched, and the people stayed vigilant, piecing together a new normal from the wreckage of what they'd lost. As of today, March 12th, 2025, Millbrook is still healing, a town forever changed by the shadow that fell across it in October 2023. The streets are quieter now, the laughter a little softer, but life goes on, stitched together with the resilience of a community that refused to let Lauren Mitchell's story end in silence. Her legacy stands firm, etched into a memorial plaque unveiled last fall near the spot where she vanished, a simple marker, but a promise that she won't be forgotten. Beside it, the flowers never stop coming, left by neighbors, friends, even strangers who heard her name and felt the weight of her loss. Lauren's little rescue dog, Milo, found a new home with her best friend, Jenny Hargrove. He's older now, grayer around the muzzle, but his eyes still carry that trust Lauren saw in him years ago. Jenny says he's her anchor, a piece of Lauren she can still hold on to. And then there's Lauren's Watch, the safety campaign her friends built from their grief. It's more than a name now. It's a network of cameras along Main Street, a phone app for alerts, a vow that no one else will slip away unnoticed. It's saved lives already. A lost child found last summer, a break-in stopped in January. Proof that even in tragedy, something good can grow. That CCTV footage still lingers, a haunting reminder etched into Millbrook's memory. It's a warning of how fast safety can shatter, even under a bright autumn sun. But in the silence that followed Lauren's story, Millbrook learned to listen for the footsteps that don't come, to watch the corners shadows can't hide, to protect its own with a fierceness they never knew they had. Lauren's gone, but she's still here in the plaque in Milo, in the town she loved, a quiet strength that whispers through the hills, urging them to keep going, to keep guarding, to keep her light alive. Lauren Mitchell's story isn't just a tale of loss, it's a call to vigilance, a mirror held up to the quiet corners of our lives we too often take for granted. It's easy to think evil hides in dark alleys or distant places, cloaked in shadows where we'd never dare to look. But Lauren's case rips that illusion apart. Sometimes it walks among us in plain sight, wearing a familiar face, hiding behind a smile we've learned to trust. She was taken on a bright October morning, steps from a bustling street, in a town that thought it knew itself. That's the sting of it. Danger doesn't always announce itself with thunder. It can whisper, and we miss it if we're not listening. Her story exposed the fragility of trust, how quickly it can unravel when the people we lean on turn into the ones we should have feared. But it also showed something stronger, the power of a community to fight back, to turn grief into action, to build something lasting from the ashes. Lauren's watch isn't just a legacy, it's a lifeline, proof that even in the wake of horror, we can protect each other. If there's one thing to carry away from this, it's this. Speak up when something feels off, pay attention to the people around you, and never assume someone's safe just because the sun's still shining. Lauren's light was stolen, but it's up to us to keep it burning, by watching, by caring, by refusing to look away.